Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the AM Report for HAPS News, the network of now. I'm Alex Mahajer. It is Monday, February 15th. I hope you all had a fantastic weekend and a lovely Valentine's Day. But we're back. It's President's Day today. Happy President's Day. And what a day for President's Day to discuss the acquittal of Donald Trump. On the program today, Miranda Yaver, political scientist, postdoctoral scholar. We're going to talk about the acquittal that happened over the weekend. We're going to talk about the 14th Amendment and whether or not it can be used to bar Trump from holding future political office, and cover some of today's top hot headlines. All of this and more on the AM Report. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining the program. I'm Alex Mahajer. If you're watching on the HAPS app, website, or platform, click the award button. Let us know you're enjoying the broadcast. It'll pop up live on air. Or if you're watching on Facebook, Reddit, YouTube, Twitter, Periscope, wherever you might be watching, leave a comment. We'll bat around with each other live on air. If you've got questions for Miranda, ask them, and we will bat around with each other. I'd like to thank all of our monthly sponsors for their recurring support of this program. Daryl Archibald, Ann Carlson, Sarah Kalogli, Tim David, Paulo de la Hoya, so many of you, Joshua Mast, thank you so much. For Jose Castro, Jose Serrato, thank you so much for your sponsorships of this independent journalism. And if you'd like to become a recurring monthly sponsor, visit me at haps.tv/@Alex. I'd like to welcome to the program Miranda Yaver, political scientist, postdoctoral scholar. Good morning, Miranda.
Good morning, Alex. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. It was a bit of a doozy of a weekend, and it's something that you say very frequently, and that I love is it's a real stupid time to be alive. Yeah. And this weekend pretty much summed that up. How are you feeling coming out of acquittal weekend?
I'm disappointed, but to be honest, it was not particularly surprising. I actually had my money on more like 55 votes to acquit, and it was 57. So there were a couple more Republicans who had a spine than I'd expected. Although I think like a lot of Democrats, I had a bit of frustration that there weren't any witnesses.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to discuss all of that, and I want to get into all of that with you because you're the exact person to talk to after all of this went down. So I'm very happy you're on. Welcome to the show. So the gutless GOP voted to acquit Donald Trump over the weekend after just a 5 or 6 day trial in the U.S. Senate. A bipartisan majority of U.S. senators found him guilty, but due to the rules of impeachment, he was still acquitted. So 7 GOP senators voted to convict: Richard Burr of North Carolina, Bill Cassidy from Los Angeles, from Louisiana, Susan Collins from Maine, Lisa Murkowski, Alaska, oh my goodness, Mitt Romney, Utah, Ben Sasse, Nebraska, Pat Toomey from Pennsylvania. So Miranda, despite the fact that there was an acquittal, it's pretty jarring, at least to me, that there was a bipartisan majority of U.S. senators. There is quite a point spread here. If this was an election, it'd be considered a landslide. And yet, because a 2/3 majority is required, he was still acquitted. Is there any other system of jurisprudence in which the majority is frequently outweighed by the minority?
So, I mean, the Senate is a body that runs based on supermajoritarian institutions, which means that the minority has a tremendous amount of power. And that can be good in some ways for checks and balances, but it also means that there are a lot of policies that are favored by the majority that aren't going to pass. Now, majorities can favor really bad policy, and so it can be good to have a check on the tyranny of the majority that the framers had concerns about. But nevertheless, when we're talking about hyper-partisanship around accountability, it can be a dangerous thing.
Well, either way, despite a bipartisan majority of U.S. senators finding Trump guilty for incitement to insurrection, the 2/3 threshold was not met, and Trump was acquitted. It's just to me, there's such a problem in saying he's acquitted, despite the fact that the majority of the senators found him guilty. Because that's just another archaic, in terms of the arcane and archaic nature of the United States Senate and how undemocratic of an institution it is. Is this representative of that, or do you think that the 2/3 majority is a necessary threshold for the Senate to meet?
So I'm mixed on this one, because if we had a simple majority, then there would be a risk that with hyperpartisanship around the presidency and everything and Congress, that impeachment would just be wielded whenever the president did something that was to the disdain of the other opposing party. And so there is something to be said for having a high threshold for conviction and removal from office, or barring from future office, because it means that the issues have to transcend party identification, essentially, unless you have a supermajority in the Senate, which isn't really which doesn't really happen. And so there are advantages to having this high bar, but maybe it should be 60 senators and not 67.
Maybe, but with us being in such a partisan divide these days, it's a pretty astounding that we even got Republican members of the Republican caucus to vote in favor of conviction. Anne Marie Huffnagel Clemens, commenter from Facebook, says best vote ever in history to convict bipartisan impeachment. Doesn't work, never has. He is guilty. Really, so this is historic. This vote was historic because Mitt Romney, last impeachment, made history by becoming the only person to cross party lines to vote in favor of a presidential impeachment. And this now makes even more history. 7 GOP senators. It's not lost on me that's some progress. There's just didn't make it all the way there.
Absolutely. I mean, Richard Burr was a huge surprise from my standpoint. Cassidy and Toomey sided with the Democrats in saying that it was a constitutional impeachment, but Richard Burr switched sides. He went from saying that it was an unconstitutional impeachment to saying that the president should be convicted. So that was one where I was thinking, did he vote correctly? Was this a mistake? Was this misheard?
Yeah. And on that note, it is amazing to me that if we were just given the weight and the quality of the presentations, you had the Democratic House impeachment managers who put together a extremely polished, unrelenting, methodical, point by point, chronological, videographic with 3D models, irrefutable evidence in a compelling and riveting presentation that was just irrefutable. I mean, it was evidence as clear as a James Cameron movie, and they did it with polish and expertise and professionalism. And then you got the Trump lawyers, particularly this Vanderdeen character, who were like mob lawyers. It was a clown show. And you're a legal expert, and you teach law, and I went to law school. I know my common law professor was Hugh Hewitt, by the way, who is a leading conservative media figure now. But in any case, even Hugh Hewitt might agree with me that this presentation by the Trump defense attorneys was just a clown show. And I want to play a little bit of this performance for you, just so we can get a full idea of how ridiculous it is that the GOP voted to acquit Donald Trump on the weight of the arguments. Here's Trump's defense lawyer.
Depositions should be done by Zoom. We didn't do this hearing by Zoom. These depositions should be done in person, in my office, in Philadelphia. That's where they should be done. I don't know how many civil lawyers are here, but that's the way it works, folks. When you want somebody's deposition, you send a notice of deposition, and they appear at the place where the notice says. That's civil process. I don't know why you're laughing.
They were laughing at him. They were laughing at him, Miranda. I mean, that moment, the Philadelphia moment, went viral over the weekend. What was your thoughts on the weight of these presentations? And did you catch that Philadelphia comment? And she's just so nonplussed that people are on a bipartisan basis laughing right in his face.
Yeah. I did catch the Philadelphia moment, and it was amusing. There were a few arguments that he was making that were very nonsensical. One being the jurisdiction issue, which the Senate does have the jurisdiction to convict an ex-president because he was impeached as a private citizen, and so they kept saying, well, he wasn't a private citizen when he was a private citizen, so he can't be impeached. Well, he was impeached when he was the president, and he can be removed as from holding future office and removed from the perks of ex-presidency as a private citizen. The second issue was the due process argument, which was rather odd because it's not a criminal trial. So impeachments are a separate issue where the normal due process arguments simply don't hold. And then the third argument that he made was the First Amendment, that inciting an insurrection was protected freedom of speech. And from that standpoint, I would say that he very much misinterpreted Brandenburg v. Ohio, because we know that the imminence and likelihood with which he incited a riot, it actually did incite a riot. So it's not protected speech.
Yeah, I think a lot of people really confuse the First Amendment, and just we need better civics education. And you shouldn't have to have a law degree to understand some of these very basic concepts of what's constitutional and what's not. But incitement to violence is literally one of the exceptions to your free speech rights. And I tried a case on incitement. It's not necessarily a difficult threshold to cross to suggest that if speech is likely to have resulted in violence, and violence results, and it's a cause, it doesn't need to be the singular cause, then it's not protected constitutional free speech. And so it was
for a fact that the riot happened. So
and we know, based on the Democratic House manager's very clear video presentations, that many of the rioters were literally parroting Trump's words as they were storming the Capitol. So it's a very, very easy to draw a causal link between the two incidents. But in any case, you mentioned sort of like how you were surprised by people like Bill Cassidy and Richard Burr. I was surprised by Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, who in the lead up to this impeachment was privately telling people that he was pleased that the Democrats were impeaching, that he's extremely furious with Donald Trump, and that this may be the Republican opportunity to purge Trump from the party. This is what he's telling people privately. Then votes that the hearing is unconstitutional earlier last week, and then of course yesterday voted to acquit Donald Trump, but then gave a very confusing speech on the floor of the Senate right after the vote was taken, in which he damns Donald Trump. I mean, it was a very, very strong speech about Trump's guilt. I want to play a little bit of that speech for you now, Miranda, and then get your feedback on it. And if you're watching from home, did you guys hear this speech by Mitch McConnell, and what did you think about it following his vote to acquit Donald Trump? Here's Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell.
American citizens attacked their own government. They used terrorism to try to stop a specific piece of domestic business they did not like. Fellow Americans beat and bloodied our own police. They stormed the Senate floor. They tried to hunt down the Speaker of the House. They built a gallows and chanted about murdering the Vice President. They did this because they'd been fed wild falsehoods by the most powerful man on earth. Because he was angry he'd lost an election. Former President Trump's actions preceded the riot for a disgraceful dereliction of duty. The House accused the former president of, quote, incitement. That is a specific term from the criminal law. Let me just put that aside for a moment and reiterate something I said weeks ago. There's no question, none, that President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of the day.
Miranda, what the actual hell? And it took a lot to not just use the F word right there. What the hell? Mitch McConnell, this infuriates me so deeply. Mitch McConnell, in no uncertain terms, laying the guilt and the blame and the disgrace and the dishonor of this incident right at Donald Trump's feet, right after voting to acquit. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, so Mitch McConnell is the person who said that the trial couldn't happen while the president was in office, and then said that they couldn't convict him because he was no longer in office. I mean that's essentially what Mitch McConnell did. You know, he's trying to have his cake and eat it too. He wants to be on the right side of history while not voting to convict a president of his own party. The arguments are really frustrating it's very frustrating that they're relying on this jurisdiction argument that when they were responsible for preventing President Trump from being convicted while he was still in office.
Yeah, and Michelle Alexander commenting, so irritating. Stephen McMillan commenting, I believe the legal term is sucking and blowing at the same time, which is, yeah, I mean, having your cake and eating it too. But Mitch McConnell, just a disgraceful, even now in the minority, a disgrace. What a disgrace, Mitch. I mean, the consequences of your vote are severe. You've caused damage to our republic, in my opinion.
And I wonder whether if Mitch McConnell had signaled that he was voting to convict, if more senators would have followed suit.
That was a lot of speculation about that. You know, Mitch McConnell gave the rest of his caucus cover to vote not guilty.
Yeah.
And because they're looking to him, and yet privately, it's just what the GOP has become such a gutless, craven party of corruption. It's unbelievable to me. I mean, they've consistently flouted and circumvented their obligations to their oaths of office, and I know that this may come off extremely partisan, and my partisan biases do precede me, but this is a new level. We need two healthy parties in the United States in order to have a healthy democracy, and the Republican Party is deeply sick as we speak. Michelle Alexander commenting, McConnell's how-to book, both sides of the mouth talking at the same time. Absolutely. And then, of course, Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, gave a speech directly following Mitch McConnell's speech, just calling him out. I'm going to play a little bit of that for you. And I know that you got to get going. So if you got to go this morning, you let me know, and we can duck out. But here's Nancy Pelosi.
What we saw in that Senate today was a cowardly group of Republicans who apparently have no options because they were afraid to defend their job, respect the institution in which they served. Imagine that it would be vandalized in so many bad ways that I won't even go into here, and that they would not respect their institute. That the president of the Senate, Mike Pence, hang Mike Pence, was the chant, and they just dismissed that. Why? Because maybe they can't get another job. What is so important about any one of us? What is so important about the political survival of any one of us that is more important than our Constitution that we take an oath to protect and defend? Oh, these cowards.
Oh, these cowards, she says, and she's hot. She's feeling very angry. And so a lot of lawmakers, Miranda, are now questioning whether the 14th Amendment can preclude Trump from taking political office in the future. The 14th Amendment, Section 3 says no person shall hold any office, civil or military, or who has taken an oath of the Constitution of the United States shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may vote 2/3 of each house to remove such a disability. Now there's talk about using the 14th Amendment, which would be basically unprecedented. And this specific language about insurrection and people who have engaged in insurrection being barred from holding federal office. And there's some divide about this. Do you have any thoughts on this particular subject?
I think it's a really, I think that would be a stretch, because the Senate has essentially said that the president was not guilty of doing that. So I think that, given that it would require a vote by Congress to prevent him from holding office, I just don't see that happening, especially in this political climate. I think that the assumption is that President Trump can run again, and probably will. Yeah.
Oh, God. All right. Well, I want to thank you, Miranda, so much for joining the program. Miranda Yaver, political scientist, postdoctoral scholar. Miranda, where can people find you, bat around with you? Because I know you got to get going.
I'm on Twitter at Miranda Yaver. Reach out. I'd love to hear from you.
And I do, and I enjoy it. So I highly suggest it. And I hope that we can always continue to bat around on Twitter. Miranda's
absolutely.
got her professional life is calling, so she can't join us anymore. She's been a frequent guest on this show almost every week for the last several months. And so I just wanted to say thanks, Miranda. You've become just such a sounding board, and I take great comfort in hearing your take. So thank you for being on the show the last few months and just giving me your time. It's been very, very lovely.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been really fun.
Yeah. All right. Talk to you soon.
Take care.
Bye-bye. So that's been Miranda Yaver, political scientist, postdoctoral scholar. What do you guys think? I have a lot of comments chiming in on screen. Raymond says, what's the point? No way they can get 2/3 votes. Let's move on and worry about the virus. Michelle Alexander says, I'd like to prevent him from leaving Florida. Funny to note, Michelle, is that Donald Trump's neighbors near Mar-a-Lago, the Mar-a-Lago estate, are suing him to not live there. They want to make sure that he doesn't live there, citing a contract that an agreement he reached in the 90s where he said that he would not use the Mar-a-Lago estate as a permanent private residence, which I just think is hilarious. So not even his neighbors want him. Michelle also says maybe they need to be unemployed so they can relate to those of us without a job during the pandemic. So out of touch with real people and priorities. Yeah, it's a frustrating time to be alive. But either way, I think the takeaway here is still that regardless of the fact that the Senate rules, the Constitution requires a 2/3 majority to convict, that a bipartisan majority of United States senators from both parties and a historic vote and a pretty widespread voted and found that Donald Trump was guilty of an incitement to insurrection. They didn't meet the threshold for conviction, but a majority of them found him guilty. And that's the takeaway. There's a moral victory in that. Now, whether or not it has practical applications, it won't. It doesn't. And that's because of the gutless Republican Party. And they knew, they took cover, they circumvented their oath. And Nancy Pelosi is absolutely right that the GOP has become a party of cowards. And it's the party of Trump. It's the cult of Trump. So this has been the AM Report for Haps News, the network of Now. We are live every weekday morning with all of your political news and headlines, quick political news and headlines to get your day started right. If you like this journalism, if you like this content, please consider sponsoring it. Become one of our monthly recurring sponsors. You can do that at haps.tv/@Alex, $5. Just click the donate button or buy me a cup of coffee or just click subscribe and you can get a notification when we go live every morning. I love seeing your faces and people chiming in from across the country and around the world. Thank you so much. We will be back tomorrow morning and thank you so much for joining. Bye-bye, everyone.